There are many ways to construct an integrated sink. In this video, I'll pick one method and I'll concentrate on how to calculate or figure out the angles that are needed for the miters. So first, let's focus on the build method that I'll be using in this video. So here's a top view showing some of the major parts that I'll be using. We'll start with the sidewalls. Note how the left, right, and back walls are outside of the sink opening. So we're going to use miter cuts on those, which would be undercuts, and we'll set the angle or degree, and don't forget to check the inside miter edge. I'm not going to miter the edge where the slope pan is mounting. I'm also going to miter both ends of the back sink wall and one end of each side sink wall. These will be overcut miters since the polished side is on the inside. Let's take a closer look at these parts. When we draw the parts in a side view, it's much easier to figure out the angles. Each part is basically a rectangle representing their length and thickness and placed in the proper location. The parts with the miters might be a little bit more complex, but here's how I'd go about it. I'll start off with drawing two rectangles representing the side view of the countertop. These must be drawn to the proper thickness and location to represent the sink opening. I've also drawn a rectangle to represent the short side of the inner wall, which my slope pan will rest on. And I'll draw the bottom of my slope pan, starting with a line from the bottom of my countertop down to my short inner wall. And next, I'll offset that line to represent the thickness of my material. And to draw the ends in properly, I'm going to start by exploding each of the rectangles that it is touching. And now I can use extend to extend the top line to make it the correct length. The top line will be too high because of the angle, so we'll move both lines down together, snapping from the endpoint to the endpoint. This also moves the bottom of our slope part below the rectangle we drew as the inner wall. So I'm going to extend the bottom line to the edge of the inner wall, and then I can trim it off to the correct length, including the needed miter angle. And now I'll draw lines from endpoint to endpoint on both ends of my slope part to represent the miters. Next, I'll get the lengths of my parts using either the dimensions or distance and angle. I'll always measure the polished side. I used a line to get the measurement of the part with the angle. We'll also need the two side walls of the sink. We can get these by drawing a rectangle and thinking about the polished side starting at the upper left endpoint to the polished edge of the back inside to the very bottom at the intersection. These parts will have undercut miters on the top edges and overcut miters on the ends. Here's how they'll look laying down with the polished side up. I'll apply the overcut miters to the ends a little less than 45 degrees. I also need to apply undercut miters to the top edges of my parts so that they fit into the undercut miters that we have on our top. And now that we have the size and angles for our three side walls, let's get the angles for our slope pan and our inner wall. It's important to remember that all references, measurements, and angles come from the polished side of our material. To get my angle, I'm going to draw a line from the end of the part perpendicular to its polished face And then I'm going to drag this line down long enough so I can work with it. This line is going to be my 90-degree reference line so that I can use dimensions and angle to go between the two. Remember to always select counterclockwise. And I'll repeat this process on the other end. I'll start by drawing a line from the end of the polished side and then perpendicular to it, dragging my line down so that I can use dimensions to define the angle, selecting counterclockwise. Repeating that process on the inner wall, referring to the polished side for my line, and then defining the angle in a counterclockwise direction. Now that we've found all the measurements, we can create the parts. We'll start with the measurements. Laying out the rectangles, I just use my backsplash button against the sink opening. And now, with our parts created, we can add in the miters. I'll start at this end of our sloped part. And referencing from the polished side, I can see that the blade goes under. So I'll choose undercut and set the miter angle to 11.6 degrees, and then I'll apply it to the proper edge of my part. The miter at the other end is also 11.6 degree angle, but as we can see, this one is an overcut. So I'll select overcut, verify the angle, and apply it to the proper edge of my part. And my last angle on this inner wall is also an overcut of 11.6 degrees. So I'll apply that as well. And now with all my parts drawn to size and proper miter angles applied, I can arrange them out on a sheet and auto toolpath them to make my program. Thank you for choosing Park Industries.